Good morning, friends. Welcome to 221st session of WiseViews Leadership Conversations. Wishing you a very happy New Year 2026. And we are joined by Ms. Junie George Varghese. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to this session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rao. And it is indeed a wonderful privilege to be here to address this August gathering today morning.
Thank you, ma'am. I will do a brief introduction and then request you to start your opening remarks. Allow me to share my screen, please. So typically, these WiseViews leadership conversations are held on Fridays. And this morning, we are holding this session, which otherwise was supposed to be at 6:30 p.m. And I thank all of you who have joined around the screen to be part of this wonderful session. As I mentioned, Ms. Junie is here. She's going to talk about why even smart leaders avoid difficult conversations. Let's see what is in store for us. So this introduction and the talk by Ms. Junie will be for about 25 minutes. And after that, we'll have roughly 40 minutes of Q&A. So here she is. Ms. Junie is the co-founder and CEO of the Fifth Mantra, a training venture for business communication skills. It is also known as the Communication Fitness Studio. She's also a training mentor for IIT Madras and a TEDx speaker, having trained thousands of students and professionals in her career spanning more than 20 years. She was one of the top 10 communication coaches to follow in 2021 as featured by Yahoo Finance. Her coaching sessions in verbal and non-verbal communication have helped individuals overcome their communication barriers and express themselves with greater clarity and confidence. She has mentored more than 1,000 students and faculty members from the Trinity College London exams in communication. Her clients undertaking EQ sessions include international sporting celebrities, corporate leaders, and professional artists. Having been trained in vocal and instrumental music, classical dance, and being a voiceover artist, she uses unique and creative approaches to help people build a stronger rapport with others in their personal and professional lives. She has completed her Master's in International Business from the prestigious IIFT, Delhi, and is certified by ICF, International Coaching Federation. She holds Extended Disc International certification and Dr. Richard Bandler Society for NLP as well. Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us this morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rao.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take one more minute to introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor R. Prasad. He is the Senior Director in the Academic Wing at ICFAI Group. He brings 3 decades of rich experience as an entrepreneur and a corporate professional subsequently, and now as an academic at ICFAI. He holds BTech from IIT Bombay and PGDM from IIM Kolkata. Welcome, Dr. Prasad, to this conversation. Going to be wonderful very soon. So, ma'am, we are all ears to you. We would like to understand why smart leaders avoid difficult conversations, and if they are smart, why should they avoid difficult conversations? So, lots of questions that we have. But anyway, Q&A session would follow. But over to you for your opening remarks so that you strengthen the premise of the topic in itself and help us understand this very, very crucial and important topic in the leadership paradigm that all of us are going through every single day. Thank you so much once again and welcome to this conversation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you indeed. So I think I'll go ahead and start with the slides. And then, of course, we will have some time to explore this topic and to probably look at the known and sometimes even the lesser known nuances of what it takes to be a leader and what leadership communication is all about. So a quick intro about the Fifth Mantra and the very unique concept we started 4 years back with the Communication Fitness Studio. So we believed that just as with muscle, in gym, you need to keep working in order to build your fitness. Same is the case when it comes to communication. We like to believe it's natural, it's inborn, but there is no one or nothing known as a born speaker or a born communicator. It is something that can be developed. And we wanted to kind of build on the concept of communication, take it beyond a presentation, public speaking, or just an interview skill. This is a life skill, something that we use in our daily interactions with people, build bonds, build relationships, both in our personal lives as well as our workplaces. So these 4 years, we have seen tremendous transformation stories, and somewhere it gave us a lot of delight in watching people discover the joy of communicating with greater clarity. Because at the end of the day, that's what we are striving to achieve. 2 years back, I was working with a very senior pharma leader who was heading the entire Europe division of a very renowned pharma company. And during one of our conversations, there was a very interesting statement that he shared with me. I know exactly what I need to say, but I'm not sure I want to be the person who says it. You may or may not have felt this sentiment. But let me share with you a few more sentiments many other leaders during their training sessions have revealed. Let's wait till appraisal. This phase will pass. HR should handle this. Right now, delivery is more important. They'll anyway figure it out. I prefer to lead by example. Now it's very, very possible that you have either heard or spoken one of these lines. So the very interesting choice of this topic today morning for discussion actually came as an inspiration from the name of this webinar itself, WiseViews Leadership Conversation. It actually set me thinking about the significance of this word conversation, right? And here, because the emphasis is on leaders, so the obvious question was, why not look at the kind of conversations leaders undertake? And what if they are not undertaking those necessary conversations? Hence our topic today, why even smart leaders avoid difficult conversations. Now, the title was not why leaders avoid. It was why even smart leaders avoid. Because the fact is, universally, all of us have faced situations where we hesitate or we think twice about dealing with an issue, talking to someone about it, maybe because of the nature of the issue or the nature of the person, right? So we look for ways to navigate around the conversation rather than deal with the conversation. And with leaders, the pressure is even higher. People assume that they know how to handle situations and people. So hence this significance of even that small word even has been used in the title. So to give you an idea of what we will be looking at, very crisp, first the perception, right? We have our own respective perceptions of what communication is, what leadership is, what is expected. So let's have a look at it. Is that perception justified? Is it even close to reality? And of course, what is reality? The problem. What is actually happening in workplaces? Because the scope of this discussion today is not in the personal realm, we will be looking at examples and references purely from the professional standpoint. Then, of course, the cost. As with any problem, we often talk of consequences. What happens if this problem is not handled? What are going to be some of the consequences we will have to bear? So that is going to be the cost. Then coming to the main part, why? The cause, right? We need to understand the reason. A few of them we may already know, right? It's not rocket science. But there could be certain finer nuances which you may discover during the course of the discussion. And finally, the way forward. Since the objective of this session is not to tell you how to communicate, but rather to help you discover why avoidance happens and what could be the problem if we continue doing it, right? So the way forward is just a way of reframing some of those questions, some of those thoughts that we have in our mind. Can we look at it differently? But it's not meant to be a solution, because that would require yet another discussion like this today. So let's first have an idea of the perception. How are we looking at leadership? What are some of the skills we consider that leaders should have or they normally have? First, intelligence, right? Now here, when I talk of intelligence, it is not a very narrow definition. I am trying to look at it as both emotional intelligence, your intellect, your ability to perceive, your intuition. So various aspects of intelligence, but we do like to believe that leaders are intelligent people. They take decisions, they understand issues, and they process information. So, yes, there is definitely a degree of intelligence. Second, experience, right? Obviously, you have climbed the ladder, you have traveled a journey, you have handled multiple responsibilities, you have grown in confidence and in exposure. So, experience is a very, very powerful tool, not just for leaders, for any individual and professional. Authority, that obviously comes with the position, right? Once you gain seniority, you will be given responsibilities, which also mean you have greater authority over those decisions and over the consequences of those decisions. And now, coming to empathy. There is, of course, a lot of awareness, a lot of talk about how leaders need to be human centric. They need to be people friendly. They need to have a pro people kind of an approach. You cannot afford to sit in a corner cabin completely insulated in your ivory tower and take decisions. You need to be a team member, a team player. So, yes, empathy is also a very important skill or a quality that a leader should have. But now comes the twist in the story. 4 of these skills that I've listed here, of course, that does not mean it's only 4 skills that leaders should have. But out of these 4, now what if these 4 skills that help a person become a leader is also creating a problem when it comes to communication? This very intelligence that we were highlighting and praising earlier could lead to overthinking, could lead to justification of their thought process, justification of why they act or why they are the way they are. Rather than accept it or be flexible, sometimes overthinking leads to rigidity. It leads to inflexibility. So the very quality that is a strength could also end up becoming a cause of weakness. Similarly, experience. What we find is experience can lead to pattern bias. I had done this there. At that time, this had happened, so therefore it will happen again. Your past experience becomes not just a leading light, but a stumbling block. Similarly, consequences, because your past experiences actually could embolden you, give you courage to do things, or it could scare you from never attempting some things again just because it didn't work the last time. Authority could become a reason to be worried about reputation. Because when you're in power, the spotlight is on you, people are looking up to you, watching you, then you're concerned. How do I maintain this reputation? How will I handle if that image takes a beating? So authority could become literally a cross around your neck. And finally, empathy. The very thing that helps you become more humane could also make you more hesitant. Now you're worried about hurting people, their feelings. You're worried about how they could think, how they could handle if you were to handle that conversation. So this is, you could say, the interesting contradiction and irony that exists in communication. The skills that are helping you build certain things is threatening when it comes to communication. So what exactly is the problem that we are witnessing in workplaces nowadays? First of all, judgment distortion. Like the word suggests, there is a gap between what is and how you are thinking about it. For example, silence, since we are talking about avoidance in conversations, silence, and if I take the Indian context, it is confused with respect, especially in a hierarchical setup. Speaking up or speaking to someone who is senior to you is seen as a form of disrespect sometimes. So being quiet is a way of acknowledging their power and their position. It could also be confused with maturity. Oh, the leader is taking his time to think about issues. He will get around to whatever needs to be done. But here the problem is not being able to see things for what it is. Silence is a form of avoidance. It is not to be always colored with maturity and respect and someone being very considerate. Sometimes the person just doesn't want to deal with the situation. So this distortion of judgment is something we find very, very commonly happening because we want to believe something. So we stick to that narrative. The second thing is the abstract trap, which all of us are guilty, not just leaders, but especially in leadership, this is again very, very evident. There is this very interesting book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, where she talks about how do you handle the truth. So in this particular book, she emphasizes the importance of stating things with clarity. But what leaders do instead, when they get uncomfortable, use complicated language, use vague sentences, use jargons. So this is a way of deflecting rather than addressing. So after the conversation or discussion happens, you find employees thinking that yes, a conversation did happen, but I still am not very sure what is expected of me or what I'm supposed to be doing. Right? So you're trying to give constructive feedback and you're trying to boost morale without giving a guide map on how they can improve. That is just meaningless words. So abstract is going to be one of the problems when it comes to leadership communication. The emphasis has to be on clarity. The third problem, the ping pong effect. Whenever there's a problem, even if you look in our homes, if there are two kids fighting, there is a problem, the first instinct is to look for the person who you can place the blame on, right? Or who you can criticize. Same is the case even with workplaces. We are all just overgrown kids, right? So when a crisis happens, even leaders sometimes fall into this trap. They are looking for people they can blame. And there is a certain version of reality they want to hold on to. It's more like my story versus your story, right? So the employee finds ways to defend himself or herself. The leader finds ways to overpower that. And this keeps going back and forth because nobody is going to take the blame. They are looking to pass it on or to deflect it. So it's known as the ping pong effect. And this leads to a gap, not just in the relationship, but also in the version of reality that is being projected. Because the leader's version is never going to necessarily match with the employee version, especially in a moment of crisis. The fourth and a slightly uncomfortable truth is power increases avoidance. This is as part of various studies that were done, and they discovered that it is not as we thought that with greater power comes greater courage. With greater power actually comes greater avoidance. The reasons, of course, we will be looking at in detail later. But what happens because of this avoidance? You have filtered feedback. That means you pick and choose information that you want to share with your team or with your employees, and the feedback does not become complete. There is some pieces of the picture missing. Either you're trying to overcompensate, you're trying to justify, or you're just trying to play safe. Truth becomes expensive. And a lot of people in leadership positions discover that the hard way, right? It's not as simple as we think that, oh, just be honest. But honesty comes at a price. And not too many leaders are entirely ready to pay that price when the time comes. And when all these problems happen in any organization, like whenever even we have undertaken team bonding exercises or synergy programs, what is often asked of us is to do this. Teach our leaders, teach our team heads, teach our HR professionals what to say, how to structure feedback, and which model to use. Unfortunately, leadership training is focusing still on the packaging. But we are still not addressing a very crucial angle. What do these people feel about themselves when they talk like that? Because there is a deeper issue behind the reason or behind our decision for avoidance, right? So it's not so simple that let's identify one model, implement it, and get it started. First, we need to understand what is happening and why are we avoiding. So the question Right in the beginning of this discussion, what I want to reframe for the members present here is the question you need to ask about yourself or about your team members or your leaders. It's not, can you handle difficult conversations? Of course, we can. And we are handling, right? So many years we have been handling in so many situations. The ideal question should be, what has your intelligence helped you avoid? Because we have all handled it in our own ways, sometimes with good results, sometimes maybe not so good, but we have handled. So, this question or this presumption that some people can handle difficult conversations and some can't, that's entirely false. Everyone can handle difficult conversations. But the only question worth asking and discussing is, what aspects of those handling are we avoiding, overlooking, or navigating around? Leadership doesn't remove fear. In fact, it just gives fear better vocabulary. And this is going to be an uncomfortable truth, because with all the other skills of leadership that we usually look up to, courage is something that we assume. But I'm not here to pass a judgment that leaders don't have courage or they don't have the ability to face problems. They do. But we are talking of a very specific area, as in leadership communication, where fear exists. And it's very important to acknowledge that, and only then can we proceed on looking at how we can handle it. So, since we're talking of so many problems that come with avoidance or that happen because of avoidance, now what is the real cost? What is the real consequence of resorting to avoidance? First of all, leaders think they're buying time, but they're actually buying damage at compounded interest. So, this is very, very self explanatory. You think you're postponing decisions, postponing conversations because you want to look for a better time or you want to look for a better circumstance. But in that time of postponing, what is happening is the multiplier effect. When you have an issue festering, both in your own mind and in the minds of your employees, there are going to be something called shadow narratives. And these are very, very dangerous. It's like a vacuum where people then feel free to put in their versions of reality or their versions of predicting what outcomes could happen. And the problem with that is you have no control or awareness of what all are the narratives. And because of this, longer the gap, the more time you take in postponing those conversations, the chances are that issue is growing. It is not getting handled, it is not getting reduced or solved, it is only getting worse. So, hence that very interesting statement that leaders are buying time at compounding interest. And not only is the issue growing, but there is also a higher incidence of ambiguity. One of the biggest banes of good communication, it is not language. It is not just the words you use, it is lack of clarity. And even in leadership communication, the minute you allow ambiguity to step in, there are going to be problems manifesting not just in miscommunication and misunderstanding, but also in the way people look at you and perceive you. The more clear you are in the way you put across your expectations and your thought processes, higher are the chances for those bonds to be built stronger. Second cost that we're going to pay is cultural erosion. Because let's say there is a sticky topic and all the employees now see that the leader will do everything he can to avoid that particular topic. So now what you avoid slowly becomes policy over a period of time. The organization starts accepting and understanding that there are some issues you will not bring up in meetings. There are some topics you will not discuss in front of that leader. So that kind of pattern will lead to blurring. There is a certain blurring, not just of standards, but even of your psychological safety and accountability. Because people who are underperforming or who have created problems because the leader does not want to deal with it, suddenly it looks permissive. It looks like the leader is okay with it. And gradually over a period of time, a lot of things slacken. People start letting go. letting go of expectations of whatever standards are expected of them. They just let go. So there is an erosion that is going to happen. And the problem with these, you can say, costs is these are not immediate, right? So the leader may be completely oblivious to these damages happening, but the truth is it is happening. So if in your organization you find a pattern emerging like this, it's really time to take a step back and have a look. Third is innovation blockage. This is very, very easy to understand why. Now, in a room, if you're going to have people, when you're having a discussion, who only agree with you or who completely support whatever you say, there is no healthy conflict. There is no resistance. There is no alternate viewpoint to challenge your thought process. And over a period of time, what will happen? That will bring innovation to an end. Because suddenly you have 50 people agreeing to do everything together. There is no new idea, there is no new way of approach. So innovation actually will decline. And I'm not saying this is applicable only to organizations who create products. It's also applicable to organizations who are in services. Innovation should not be limited to only designing a product or coming out with a new product. Innovative approach is required in our day-to-day dealing, whether it's with people, whether it is handling a crisis within the organization. We need to be innovative. And the minute you have an echo chamber, that ensures innovation is blocked. Then there's something known as the human sustainability crisis. Because as you saw in the beginning, that one statement, the HR will handle it. A lot of times, sticky issues are passed on to HR. The leader thinks he's taken the easy way out, but what he doesn't realize, the very thing that he fears is happening. The erosion of his credibility and identity. Because now suddenly he is not seen as a functional leader. He's just seen as someone who just authorizes things, passes orders, and just sits there occupying that position. He just likes to pass on anything that's uncomfortable or difficult. And the irony is, it has been linked with burnout. Usually, we would think delegating things to others would free us, right? We should be feeling stronger, we should be feeling happier. But in the case of leadership, the more they delegate difficult tasks to others, there is an internal conflict and dilemma that they undergo. Should I have done this? Should I not have done this? And this kind of conflict leads to burnout. And the percentage, as you can see, is pretty high. And these are figures at the global level. This is not just limited to India or to one sector. Now, one aspect I'd like to really focus on in terms of costs is micro failure. Let's say we look at one single situation where one conversation is avoided. The issue has been either buried, or it has been postponed, or it has been put comfortably vague. This is considered a micro failure, right? So it's not that this is happening daily, but in that moment, it is a failure of soft skills. And this micro failure, when it stacks up, because there are going to be multiple issues that will keep coming up, then you have some of these very interesting terminologies that happen. Job hugging, right? It's literally like the Chipko moment that happened years back. So here, the employees literally hold on to the job, but they are not engaged. Because now they know the leader is not really involved, nor is anything great expected of them, but they want to hold on to the job because they don't want to lose it. So these are known as the job huggers. And the problem with this is you don't have productivity. However, they will prevent new talent from coming in as well because the post is occupied. So job hugging actually will be detrimental to the organization in the long run. Second is quiet cracking. These are those fine hairline fractures. So just as an X-ray would throw it up, similarly, even in an organization's culture, they're not immediately visible. But every avoided conversation is a quiet crack. And over a period of time, it will lead to fracture. And not even a clean fracture, a messy compound fracture. Third is mediocrity. Now, as we saw with job huggers, If you're going to retain talent who is not involved, who is not engaged, who is not productive, it is going to create a culture of mediocrity, right? So the leader is looking like he is not worried or he is not concerned about productivity. So that is going to create a culture of it. And over a period of time, when the entire atmosphere or the organization starts operating that way, the ones who are productive will look for reasons to leave the place, right? So turnover is pretty high with places where engagement is low. And this again is proven. There'll be a study that I'll be sharing now, which actually talks of this. That is your Gallup's State of the Global Workplace 2025 report. This is a very interesting study that happened in US across 140 countries, where they looked at multiple workplaces and they tried to associate what is happening in terms of employee engagement, emotional well-being, leadership qualities with outcomes of productivity. And what they found is pretty appalling figures. Worldwide, employee engagement is dropped to as low as 21%. Now, when you talk of engagement, that means only 20% of employees are engaged. 80% of the workforce is either stuck or they are looking for reasons to get away. So, how is that going to benefit the organization, and what could be the repercussions in the long run? And the loss in productivity, it's obviously it's never that easy to quantify it, but they have put an estimate of over $400 billion. That is mind-numbing figure, right? So the significance of conversations is not just about a few words or just putting up an image. It is actually leading to consequences. You avoid it, you're going to pay the price for it. Now, coming to the most critical or important thing, understanding the why, the cause. Why are we avoiding these conversations? Now, here, when I say we, it is not just to limit it to leaders, right? Because all of us, in our own ways, in our own journeys, will take up leadership roles. Do not think that leadership is only limited or restricted to the workplace. Whether in our social circles, in our personal circles, there will be times when we step up, we take responsibility. So that is similar to a leadership role. And hence, understanding this why is significantly important for all of us. First of all, the amygdala hijack. There is this very interesting book, Words Can Change Your Brain. In this particular book, the authors, Andrew and Mark, they talk about how whenever there is conflict, for a lot of us, it's not just introverts or not just people who are passive, but for a lot of us, conflict, the brain perceives it as a physical threat. And the minute that happens, our limbic system, the emotion center of the brain, which is your amygdala, it gets into an overdrive because there's a threat. So you need to get into that fight or flight response. And when that happens, a lot of these responses we do find the freezing, the snapping, or maybe getting overtly impulsive or getting aggressive. We find these kind of responses during conversations, especially negative conversations. So when that happens, be very, very assured that person is not getting personal with you. It's not because they hate you or they dislike you. They're doing it because they're feeling threatened. Somewhere, their emotional center has overpowered their logical prefrontal cortex. So this limbic system taking over logical thinking will lead to words, will lead to responses that are not positive at all. And a crisis is obviously the litmus test. Sometimes, even in times of great happiness, you find people unable to handle it. Like there is that very famous principle, right? Like handling failure is important, but what is more important is the ability to handle success. So, same in the case of the workplace. There are times where people are actually not in a difficult conversation, but they still find this amygdala hijack happening. So, it's very important to recognize when it's happening to us. Am I feeling defensive? Am I getting unapproachable in the way I respond whenever I am put in a tight spot? The second reason, cognitive calibration. That means my brain wires itself in the way I process information and the way I think about things. Now, intelligence, as we saw earlier, can be a problem. Sometimes we end up overthinking the worst scenarios and we keep building up. We are very creative when it comes to thinking of the worst, right? So maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen, maybe I will lose this, maybe the people will hate me. We are much more conservative when it comes to thinking positive outcomes. We are far more happier and natural when it comes to thinking of worst case scenarios. And cognitive calibration happens over a period of time. Like when you're constantly in that mode where every single thing you overanalyze and you start thinking what all could happen wrong, then it will lead to decision paralysis. That means you're unable to take a clear stand. You will try and leave it as vague and as ambiguous as possible. And this again is something we can recognize. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with one incident. Gradually, a pattern is established. And the pattern is not just in how we conduct our body language, but it's a pattern in the way our brains are wired to think. I'll give you a small example of cognitive calibration. When you meet some people, you ask them to describe an experience. Some people start out with the highlights of that experience. They will say, oh, it was amazing. We ate this, we went there, we met all these people. They start with that. Whereas some people will start with what all went wrong in that experience. I missed my flight. Oh my God, the cab drivers were like this. The traffic was terrible. That place is now really spoiled. It's not like how it was 20 years back. They'll start with that. In both these cases, people had both kinds of experiences, positive and negative. Some things they liked, some they didn't. But there is a wiring that has happened where you're penchant to pick up or notice negative things, the downfalls first or earlier and faster than things that are going well. So, similarly, even in the case of difficult conversations, there is a calibration that happens. There is a pattern that you create and you become a part of, sometimes even without realizing. The third is the nice versus kind trap. These words are increasingly used and very often used when it comes to describing the kind of leader an organization has. So, in this, again, a very, very noteworthy book, Crucial Conversations, there is a reference to how to demarcate nice and kind. Being nice is when you tell people what they want to hear, and being kind is when you tell people what they need to hear, right? Now, leadership is the ability to tell people what they need to hear. But just because I'm saying need to hear doesn't mean the leader has to become like a headmaster or a disciplinarian, right? There is obviously a need to humanize conversations. However, avoiding conversations, trying to play nice, is going to be a problem if you cannot differentiate between what it means, right? So, a lot of people confuse the two. He's kind and nice. No, it never works that way because our brains are wired to think that we cannot be both. So, this book actually talks about that contradiction. We are so binary in our thought process. It's like we have to make a choice. I can either be a good guy, a nice guy who everyone likes with a positive image, or I can be a doer, a decision maker, but someone who people can't stand, right? But obviously, our approach has to be marrying the two. We have to stop looking at it as one or the other. It has to be one and the other. So, this inability to differentiate can become a very, very big problem when it comes to that decision to take or to make that conversation. In today's scenario, this is again very, very relevant and increasingly becoming a reason why leaders avoid conversations. Very complex cultural, regulatory, legislative landscape. People are scared. There could be lawsuits filed. There could be cancel culture. There could be trolling. There could be any kind of, regulatory action taken against them if someone's feelings are hurt or there is some perceived sense of insult. Or because with all these various terminologies and fads and everything that's being done, serious issues are getting trivialized, right? So leaders don't want to get into any messy situation. So the best way out, stay away from it. So this becomes again a very big reason why certain conversations are avoided. Like it'll handle itself, or people will find a way out. They would prefer that kind of an approach. Then we have something known as asynchronous friction. Now, the terminology sounds very complex and hard, but the concept is very clear. We have multiple mediums of communication today. So whether it is a Slack thread, whether it is a Zoom call, whether it is an email, or whether it is WhatsApp, there are multiple mediums and channels of communication that leaders are using. But now comes the problem. How do I decide for which kind of conversation, which medium do I use? So here, a couple of these, even in crucial conversations, the authors mention about this. They say match the complexity of the message with the richness of the channel. Now, richness of the channel means how many elements can come in, where you can see the face of the person, you can hear the voice of the person, you can include non-verbal cues. Does the message require that kind of involvement? Like sometimes on social media, you come across these corporate stories where people are laid off over an email or over a WhatsApp message. It is seen as a very inconsiderate way to be handling a complex situation like that. And that is a clear example of asynchronous friction. It's not that you cannot use WhatsApp messaging to communicate with your employees, but the nature of the issue is not chosen as per the channel, right? Laying a person off is an emotional issue. It is going to be a very difficult kind of conversation and a situation for that employee. So there to take an impersonal or a detached channel like a WhatsApp message will seem the incorrect thing to do. So a leader will have to have the ability to discern that. What is my message? Which channel will best do it justice? Right? So asynchronous friction again is a reason that we find in today's times. This obviously would not come up 50 years back. But today it is very relevant and one of the strong reasons why bad communication or lack of communication happens. Finally, not mapping the conversation. So think of it's something like Google Maps for communication. Before you have a difficult conversation, it's very important to have an understanding about the person, about what you're going to say, what could be the trigger points, what direction that communication could take. And if it goes off track, let's say you're expecting a certain sequence, but it goes off track, they react differently, then how can you repair on the spot rather than avoid the conversation? Right? So that kind of mapping is very, very rarely done. People think they will improvise, and that's a very bad idea. Right? Improvisation does not even work with impromptu speeches. So let alone difficult conversations. So there's this very nice terminology they use here. It should be called the architecture of conversation. Like you would have heard the art of conversation, right? So when it comes to difficult conversations, it should not be treated as an impromptu exercise or something that you do one fine Monday morning. It has to be thought of as an architecture, a blueprint, a plan that you build and go about executing. The presence of AI, surprisingly, is also present here as one of the reasons. Because everywhere today, any discussion is incomplete without mentioning AI as one of the tools or one of the problems. So here, the problem is something else. AI is not really doing anything here, but it is a perceived pressure that leaders have created for themselves. Because AIs come with perfect responses. They have no fear of judgment. They have no fear of authority. They are not really worried about consequences. They state things as it is, right? You ask a question, you get that answer. Whether you like it or not is your problem. But now, because AI is there with that perfect communication abilities, leaders now feel the pressure to become more human, right? It's more like they want to become superhuman. So now my WhatsApp messages also should be perfect. My kind of responses also should be on the dot, right? So that pressure is quite exhausting when you have to do it on a sustained basis every day. So then again, what happens? You start choosing which are the conversations that are convenient. I'll go ahead with that. The rest, I'll just leave it for the time being or pass it on to someone else who can do it for me. Now, the problem with this is this idea or concept of perfect. Though as human beings, we have always, like to chase that concept. But the issue is there is no perfect communication. There is no perfect leader and there is no perfect solution, right? Everything is contextual. What works in one situation may or may not work in the next. So there is a certain evolution, a certain flexibility, a certain journey that one will have to undertake when it comes to having those conversations. The focus needs to be less on perfect and more on clarity and effectiveness. Is that person understanding what you're saying? That has to be the goal, not just perfect grammar or the perfect construct. So we've had a lot of overwhelming details in terms of problems, in terms of cause, and also in terms of reasons why all of this is happening, right? A little bit of an information overload. But the key question is, kya karna hai? What do we do about this? So obviously, today we are not looking at approaches or models or certain pathways that we have to adopt. But I will just share a few pointers that could help in the way you look at difficult conversations. Starting with decrease your conversational latency. Latency is the time between noticing a problem and finally addressing it verbally or non-verbally. So there is a time period, a lag that happens. The more you avoid, higher is the latency. And gradually, latency will finally end up in burial of the issue, right? You just don't come to it at all. So can you try reducing the latency? If normally when you face a difficult conversation, you take maybe 3 days or maybe a week to think about it, can I reduce it by a day consciously? Or can I reduce it by a few hours consciously? So that is a rewiring, a recalibrating of my brain in the way I view and handle difficult conversations. And this is not to be taken lightly, right? Patterns are powerful, and we all have patterns. So when it comes to communication, can we recognize some of the patterns we have and actively chip at it little by little? Because changes don't happen all of a sudden, right? Nobody becomes a great communicator after one day of discussion or after one training session. It doesn't happen. But what it does is it sets off a thought process, it sets off a chain of events that could lead to meaningful change in the long run. So focus on clarity as your objective. Now, whether it is using simple language, whether it is getting straight to the point, whether it is using bullet points in your mails, whatever is the medium and the approach, let clarity be your objective, nothing else. Not how they think of me or how this, what all outcomes could happen. All that is further complicating the issue and resulting in where we are today, right? Avoiding, delaying, postponing, everything possible not to have that conversation. So, can we bring a focus back on clarity, reduce that latency? That will help us address issues more and maybe even faster. Identify a specific conversation you have been saving for later. We all have, right? If we are just given a sheet of paper and told to write down the various conversations we have been meaning to have, the phone call I've been wanting to make, the kind of talking I have been wishing I could, there's going to be a long list, right? So, can I identify one which I can work on and go ahead and execute? Now, why is this important? Because we are all creatures not just of habit but also of patterns. And there is a feedback loop that sets in when you have a successful outcome or you complete a pending task. There is a feedback to the brain. That wasn't so bad. I managed to do it. And that kind of feedback slowly needs to become a new pattern where I get comfortable not by pushing things, but by doing things. Right? So it starts with one, the power of one, as they say. And I would like to give you a reframed question. Normally, the question is, how can I delay it? Right? Or what can I do not to have that conversation? Instead, one question you can have to think about, not to answer to anyone, what meaning did or will my silence create? So there could have been past conversations which you remember where you didn't have them. What impact did that create? Do you have an idea? Is it possible to think of what could have happened? And future, what meaning will my silence create? How are people going to view this avoidance? What is going to be the consequence or the cost that I end up paying, or maybe my organization ends up paying? And instead of saying, how do I say this? Right? That's a very common statement people say. I want to, but I don't know how to. Instead of that, which identity am I protecting by staying silent? And the minute we change the question, you'll be surprised by how easily that answer comes to you. Because we all are in that quest of creating images, right? So whether you're a leader or not, you have a certain image in your circle of people, your circle of influence. So what is that image? And by you staying silent, which image is being protected? That clarity can be very, very enlightening. Second, what identity do I strengthen by speaking clearly? So if there is an image that might take a hit by speaking up, there is also an image that benefits from speaking up. So do you recognize those images that you have? Because let's be real, we all have images, right? What we show or project to the outside world and even to people around us. So are we aware of some of those images? So the essential question that I wished to raise was this: will you lead the conversation or will it lead you? Because most of the times it's the conversation that's leading us. The minute we decide to avoid it or to stay away from it, we are handing over that power to the circumstance, to the conversation, to the problem. We are just handing it over, right? So fear is there. Let's acknowledge that. We are scared. But at the same time, there are ways and reasons to counter that fear. So finally, I'd like to end on this very interesting quote by the management guru, Peter Drucker himself. He says, communication is judged not by intent, but by what's being understood. So let's not confuse intent with impact. Just because you wish to or you thought of it, people are not going to understand it that way till you communicate it. So whether it's a problem, whether it's appreciation, whether it's just putting your point of view, clear communication is going to be needed. And if you're a leader, all the more so. And if it's a difficult conversation, even more so, right? So with that, thank you so much. An absolute pleasure to share this topic and discuss it with the group. And as Mr. Rao said, the floor is open for questions.
While going through the session, there were three important things that crossed my mind. The first one is that very interesting way of mathematical assessment of the whole issue. I really like the way you have broken it down to look at what are the various pieces that that describe a problem as well as identify the root cause and partially provide some solutions in terms of way forward. So that mathematical assessment was very interesting. Second, it's very realistic and relatable. To be very honest, a lot of points that you mentioned are applicable to me as well as a leader, and I'm sure it is applicable to a large number of people around the screen who are watching and being part of this session today. So it's relatable. and it's realistic. It's not jargon, or it is something that's happening only in certain geographies or in certain domains of work. It is happening right here, right now, with most of us, or at least I can say it is happening with me. The third one is that it is pretty unfair to bucket this as a communication discussion. It is long back seeded to be a communication issue. It is very unfair because it talks about a very large canvas of being a conscious leader, being a mindful leader, leadership as a paradigm in itself, being very empathetic, being very conscious of the consequences of one's actions and inactions. So, therefore, it is not communication. Maybe it is communication to start with, but I think we need to bucket it elsewhere as a mindful and leadership that is very conscious of its consequences. So it's deep rooted, and it's not just communication. For example, various leaders in various situations have differing objectives. Objectives are varying, and therefore, to meet those objectives in various contexts, they will have to respond, react, and behave in certain ways. And therefore, they will have to pick up a particular style of leadership, and accordingly, the communication flows. But communication flows because there is a mental makeup of mind which is related to a certain objective of the context in which they are operating. So therefore, it cannot be unfairly bucketed as a communication issue. It's a larger issue. So these are the three important ideas and thoughts that crossed my mind while listening to you. Although we budgeted 20 minutes for you, you have taken a longer time, but it's good. It's good in a way. It's nice to listen to a session like this on the first day of the new year. And great learning is in store for us all the 364 days as well. That's the cultural assumption that we have. What happens on the first day of the new year will also continue to happen on the subsequent days. Thank you so much, ma'am, for packing in wonderful insights, lighter jargon, but deeply relatable issues that you have packed in. We will now have a few questions, definitely. I'll request Professor Prasad to come in for the first cluster of questions. Kindly allow us to take a little more time, because what has been consumed by you will also have to be provided by you, so that we can ask a few questions. Thank you, ma'am, and request Professor Prasad to come in. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Sudhakar. I think, it being a working day, I would restrict my questions. I'll take one question right now. Ma'am, it's an excellent topic to choose, though I expected that we will actually have the conversation, in the sense that, how do you do a difficult conversation is the largest scarcity in the world. You ask me for most relationship problems, for most political problems, you talk about whichever problems, the one of those reasons is always that, what has been put in the title. So now, if I just take that one question to look at the other space, which, you didn't intend to structure into this. So the question is, can you give us one example where many of these points, which are many of these structures and, scaffolding, angles, risks, opportunities, they have got covered in a popular figure that many of us know, so that there is a relatability to, because lots of these habits come if you follow others. If you've seen that somebody's done something, and okay, this is doable, I can also do that, I want to do that. So can you give us one example of popular figure?
I think my list normally begins, and here also it would be relevant, as in the case of Mr. Ratan Tata. Because here, a couple of things that we talked about. First of all, being able to take a stand without worrying too much about the outcomes or how that image will be perceived or what he will be looked at. He has shown time and again, be it within his organization or be it even outside. I'm not saying that he is flawless as a leader, right? But in many of these communication aspects, I rate him as one exemplary figure to observe and follow and emulate. But having said that, I would still like to believe that it's always better if we can recognize our natural style and work on identifying our core strengths, highlighting those strengths, identifying areas that hold us back, and looking at ways we can minimize the damage that we are causing. Because as I said earlier, there is no perfect communication. There is no perfect solution to communication problems. But can we have better thought processes? Because communication is usually limited to verbal and non-verbal, which is incorrect. Communication begins in the mind. So, our thought process, our mindset, our approach, our beliefs, whether it is our conditioning or whether it's acquired, all of this is going to have an impact in the way we respond. And even before respond, in the way we understand. Because you can only respond to something that you process and pick up. The way we view people, the way we view a context or a situation will influence the kind of response we decide to give it. So, this is a very, very personal journey. It's a contextual journey, right? You can't have, like, let's say, two people from the same environment working with the same set of constraints will still have two different responses. So, I do understand, I agree that it helps to have a role model. But when it comes to communication, which is a very, very individualistic, a
Ma'am, if
very
I may,
personal, sorry, yes,
see that's a to-do thing, and we don't have the time to discuss that right now.
right,
So what I'm trying to do is, see, there are a lot of people who take inspiration. One of the most important things in WiseViews is inspiration.
correct,
So in the inspiration, if you take Ratan Tata, there are a lot of things that he has done. So if you're able to pick and few some of those things which you are alluding to when you say Ratan Tata is taken a stand, and connect it to what you have discussed in the framework that you presented, that
right.
kind of illustrates and reduces the intellectual and abstract aspect of what we are discussing.
Right. So, two things I will connect it with Mr. Tata. One is clarity. And this is something which I will keep emphasizing when it comes to good communication, right? It's not just about difficult conversation. Any conversation, any communication, are you someone who is vague or are you clear? When it comes to Mr. Tata, if you go through any of the archives of his interviews or even certain situations which other people narrate as examples,
You can take an
find there
example,
is
ma'am. You can take an example because people connect immediately.
okay. There is this one instance that happened apparently in the Tata House in Mumbai once when an ad agency was invited to give a brief. They were not to meet Mr. Tata, they were meeting some other senior official. But once the meeting was done, the senior official and the head of the ad agency team, they walked out, got into the lift, and they went to the ground floor. There were young junior copywriters who were part of the team who lagged behind. So they wanted to allow the seniors to leave first. So they were kind of lagging behind in the corridor, kind of looking around, admiring the environment of Tata House. And while they were standing there, an elderly person came in and they didn't see the person. The person was behind them. And there was a conversation between that person and the person manning the lift. So the question was, are they waiting to take the lift? So the person said yes. But looking at their age and profile, even the person, the lift operator, had that dismissive air. These are a bunch of bachas, right? So then the person gave a very direct instruction: let them go by the lift, I'll take the stairs. When that was said, the two copywriters turned around only to see the retreating back of Mr. Ratan Tata. He was the man who decided the guests, the young copywriters, they should be getting access to the lift first. The decision was simple. There was no tom-tomming of the grandness of his gesture or anything, but there was clarity. And even the lift operator got that indirect message. The message was not to listen to Mr. Tata. The message was treat our guests with that certain respect, because Mr. Tata picked up that the lift operator was getting dismissive and he was ready to give Mr. Tata the privilege of using the lift rather than the junior copywriters. Right? So he has intuitively picked up the thinking of the person, but he didn't want to insult the lift operator or make him feel small about thinking that way. Instead, he just led by example, but also by communicating clearly. Let them have the lift, I will take the stairs. Right? So, of course, there are a lot of these stories that I'm sure we keep reading on social media or in newspapers. So those various instances keep highlighting his humane approach. But I believe kindness is not the only aspect. Kindness is wasted if it is not expressed. And he was one man who knew how to do it well. So, on several parameters of leadership, I kind of look up to him as a good role model.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll come up with the next question, extremely important one.
Yeah.
And again, I would like an anecdote like this because, it communicates very directly. It's very clear about what you're saying. Not much of explanation is needed when you say that this is what he did because it comes in very clearly. And this question is, the world's challenge is to integrate Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Okay. And then move with them and then spiral the benefits of that integration into the future of the world. This is
Right.
and you have lots of conversations about communication, work styles, etc. of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And there's no need to judge them. But what I'm trying to now put in is, now if you put this framework, if you take a real world case for Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and there are difficult conversations there also. So can you give us an anecdote there which highlights maybe different parts?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of one of my clients. He is a young age entrepreneur. You can say he is part of the family business, but definitely things changed once he took over, right? And it was not a rough transition or any kind of a conflict laden transition, but yes, there were changes. And now the challenge was, here was a guy who was barely 27, and he was managing and leading a team with very experienced professionals, many of them even crossing 50. So, in such a scenario, he was faced with this dilemma like, how do I make them take me seriously? But at the same time, how do I bond with them? Because I don't want to play boss. But at the same time, I have to ensure the authority and the position is respected. So, this is the problem that he faced. Now, in this situation, there were a couple of things, of course, that we discussed, which is not really required here. But one thing I'd like to talk about is whenever we talk of these labels, whether it's millennials or X or Z, the point is, do we recognize the universality of certain emotions that all these generations are seeking or valuing? Because for that senior professional, when he's pretending to be dismissive of new leadership, he's not actually hating the boy. What he's expressing is his fear that his work may not be valued, he may be replaced, he may end up even losing his job, or possibly he is outdated. There are these certain internal dilemmas and conflicts that are going on in that person's mind. And similarly, from this boy's point of view, his challenge is, will I be able to live up to what my father established? Will I ever even match up, forget doing something more? So when you look at only the obvious differences, we fail to notice the underlying universality. Whether you're 27, whether you're 57, whether you're 90, at the end of the day, people want to be respected and seen. People are looking for leaders they can trust, and they are looking for good outcomes, right? So whether you're leading the organization or working there, at the end of the day, everybody wants a positive outcome. So even in this case, our next task was actually understanding profiles of people better. Instead of just clubbing them as these are the seniors, these are the freshers, or these are people who have headed that division, could we have a better understanding of the person behind those roles and titles? Because we have to connect as people, right? There is never going to be a conversation or any kind of productivity unless there is a human connect. People will work when they believe in it. People will give you respect when they believe in you and that they can turn to you or they can trust you. So establishing and building that trust takes time and it requires human connect. So this is just a small example because there are, of course, far larger issues also when it comes to any such transition. But this was just to highlight that this demarcation or this differentiation that we constantly hear at a workplace, the generational gap, we are focusing on the obvious difference, but we need to look at the similarities.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I'll hand it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, ma'am. It's a great conversation. I have one question before others raise their hand to directly talk to you. The question is that if we take this cue, which you have just mentioned, understand the person behind the role. Now, leaders, by definition, are always under the spotlight. They're always watched, judged. You're damned if you do something, and you're damned if you don't do anything. Okay, so there is one spotlight issue. The second is you also carry the burden of business performance. It is not just trying to be a conformity with the model or a textbook kind of a leader, but then there is that burden of producing results and burden of performance in terms of the organizational objectives as well. So if these two are very important, and you also say that there is always a pressure to be a perfect human, which is on the other side. Okay, there can never be a perfect human. Similarly, there can never be a perfect leader. Is it not natural for us to come with these kind of shortcomings? We all have the shortcomings, and therefore leaders also are likely to have shortcomings, and therefore they are likely to fail in various situations, which the others who are judging, they don't have these burdens, they don't have the spotlight which I mentioned.
Right.
So where is the question actually? Where is the problem actually?
The problem is thinking vulnerability is a problem.
Mhm.
These pressures and burdens that you mentioned, a lot of times leaders keep it to themselves. I'll give you an example even in this. There was a very senior agency owner who once said that they lost out on a very prestigious client because of some mishandling that happened, some miscommunication, and he was furious about it. So he charged into that meeting room, and instead of addressing what happened, he ended up saying that you guys will keep doing this, and I cannot expect anything more from you guys. This was the first snapping, right? It was not a conversation. Then the next 15 to 20 minutes was only each member in that room trying to defend how they were right, and it was someone else who had messed up. So the point being, had he come in and said why that client is so important, what could be the risks of losing that client? And now, what are the consequences after having lost the client? And what are the certain things or protocols that need to be put in place so that they don't lose another such important client? Now, suddenly, the nature of the discussion changes. In fact, you might even have members pitching in with their ideas of how to possibly handle the situation or who can handle it better. Because there are times when people will actually volunteer, offer, and say, give it to him. He is naturally good at this. They will even support each other, right? Because it's for a collective outcome, a collective good. So, vulnerability is not the word, unfortunately, is associated with some kind of a avoidable, some kind of a weak association. But vulnerability is what makes us real. As you very correctly said, we are going to come with vulnerabilities, flaws, right? And flaw is also a very unfair word, it's very harsh. It is a part of us. We are going to do some things well, we are going to do some things not so well. Same is the case even with people in power or people who are already successful. They did some things well, that's why they are successful. But that doesn't mean they will not do mistakes in future. So I think this whole exercise objective was to bring back focus on having conversations, bring clarity. What is going on? What is the problem? What could be the way forward? What are the things or the issues with him? What are the issues or expectations he has of his team? Clear communication very rarely is going to make people think less of you. In fact, people respect people who can express their point of view with clarity. It's a it's a misinformed opinion that the more vague you are, the more intellectual you sound, or the more complex and layered you will be treated as. No, people will just dismiss you. Pata nahi, he's a confused person. What he thinks, what he does, we never understand. That is the feedback that is found. So I think yes, it's a valid point, but again, the way forward is only with more clear communication.
But then what strikes me at this point in time is the example of our former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. He was lauded as a man of few words, and to a large extent, silence was offered as a strategy. Is there any perspective on applying your framework into his operational strategy?
I'm glad you raised that. The problem is not with silence, right? Silence is golden. If you have nothing of value to offer, you might as well be quiet, right? But we have to know the difference between silence being a strategy and silence becoming a default.
Okay.
And if leaders turn to the default mode, that is when problems start, right? Because there will be times when it's good to be an observer, it's good to be a listener, right? And that's why listening is rated even higher than speaking.
Correct.
Unfortunately, people don't view it that way, but in the hierarchy, it is that way, right? So with Mr. Rao, but I would also highlight here the very quality that he was praised for. At that time, there were occasions where he was crucified also for it.
Right.
Right? People would misinterpret it as inaction or indecisive nature. So perception is a very dangerous game to play. People are going to have perceptions. But the only way to counter it is to be expressive whenever you are with clarity. That's the only possible way. You obviously cannot go around doctoring minds.
Okay, ma'am. Good. I have this last question, and it is like counterintuitive, probably. The question is, are you even smart if you avoid difficult conversations?
You are smart because if you know when to keep quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing when to keep quiet, if you start extending it or overusing this quality, that's when it becomes a problem, right? Because there are certain meetings and certain crisis situations where we have seen where leaders who are observant, who are patient, they have taken better judgments and decisions rather than someone who has a knee-jerk reaction or who jumps at the first communication that they receive. Right? So smart leaders definitely are smart because they're quiet. But the important thing is they know when to be quiet and when to be expressive.
Okay, great. So the assumption was that if you know that you cannot avoid difficult conversations, then you are smart. But how do we assume that smart leaders also avoid difficult conversations? So that was my pivot to that. In any case, I got the answer. Thank you so much, ma'am. And it looks like we don't have any more questions from the audience. So I take it as a wrap, and I would love to just summarize it in a few words and take it forward. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. You have very patiently listed out all the possible analytical points to the given situation and explained why it happens as well. And therefore, this is a very, very important issue. As I mentioned in the beginning, it is quite relatable. Therefore, it's extremely important. It is relatable in many ways that we have seen every single day in various domains, in each one of our offices and even in real life. I mean, beyond office as well, in personal lives as well. We see these situations coming up. We keep avoiding difficult conversations with the family members also. And we kind of avoid by blaming it on lack of time, not the right situation, postponing it, so on and so forth. For example, when a high-performing team member delivers results but behaves disrespectfully, we don't question. A senior leader avoiding the honest feedback to a long-serving colleague out of loyalty, that also is a big burden, but no one actually picks that up. Let's not escalate, someone says. It may demotivate the team, so we postpone it. A leader delays a difficult conversation saying, maybe we'll look at it after the appraisal. So these are, even you have mentioned this. In a meeting, everyone agrees, but outside, everyone disagrees. Because in the meeting, at the end of it, people say, wonderful, sir, your points are valid, absolutely fine, we should go for it. But soon after coming out of the meeting, large number of them actually outside the room disagree with what has been presented inside the room. So in certain startup situations or entrepreneurial journeys, a founder avoiding confronting a co-founder for the fear of losing that relationship or bringing to the fore that misalignment. But the real issue is misalignment. Someone has to take that up. So every now and then in every situation, these questions and these difficult situations have surfaced, and we needed to respond, we needed to act on it, but we didn't. And therefore, this session on why even smart leaders avoid difficult conversations is pretty applicable, related to all of us in business and out of business as well. And for helping us understand and put it in perspective, I thank you. And I also thank Professor G.K. Srikanth, who has recommended you for doing this session with us, ma'am. And I'm sure all the members around the screen have benefited today as being part of this session. We will write a summary for this session. If you can help us with your PPT, it'll aid us in making the summary, and then we'll share the copy of the summary with you. Once you approve, we'll take it forward and put it on our archives. Along with the video, there'll be a text summary as well, because learning can be at our pace. It can be calm and can be peaceful. That's what we have done for the last 220 sessions. So we would like to do it for your session as well. And we'll stay in touch with you and understand. I'll pick your brains for a few difficult questions as well. I'll write an email to you, and very contextual, very situational, specific to the problem kind of questions. And probably you can help us understand and clarify without me paying any fees to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time on the day one of the new year 2026. I wish you all the best for the future conversations. We hope to have 52 conversations. The one is done, another 51 to go for this year. We look forward very, very happily to connect with great leaders like this, and greater conversations like this happening every single week on Fridays. So we welcome you back next week as well. Keep learning more on the fifth mantra, and also understand why they call it the the communication fitness studio. There's a great deal of learning there. Some of the case studies and the blogs that we can look at and learn from. I wish you a wonderful learning journey from here onwards as well. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you for your last words.
Thank you indeed. And I definitely have to mention a quick apology for having overrun the time, because I do understand weekday how chaotic it can be for every working person. However, yes, I sincerely hope that there are some things that you have found of value that you would like to carry forward. At the end of the day, we don't want this just to be a discussion. If it's something that can percolate into your life, into your conversations, I think that's where our job is done. So with that, thank you so much.
Great, ma'am. Thank you so much once again on behalf of all of us. Thank you, Dr. Prasad, for your patient contextual intervention and making the whole conversation very, very useful. And also, I think for the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, all the members who are already present on the screen, I think it was very, very useful to all of them. So ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend and also a great year ahead. Thank you all.